Hey everyone, this is Mekkah, and you're watching Fire Emblem Pitfalls. Been a while, hasn't it? Why the hell does it take so long to get these out? Well, that's for a combination of reasons. I've become a little bit too perfectionist for this series, so I've actually written and rewritten the script for Pitfalls 10 like several times, at least 3 times. Each time with a different subject, and only then I would realize that it wasn't really what I wanted it to be. And I gotta say, it's also become a bit harder to find new subjects to tackle. I don't really want to discuss individual underrated or overrated characters on Pitfalls anymore, because that's what I made the waifu series for, and I'm finding it difficult to come up with anything new that also fits with the last episodes of Pitfalls. Part of this difficulty is probably because I've never really defined what Fire Emblem Pitfalls is, other than talking about popular misconceptions in the Fire Emblem fanbase. Hey guys, this is Mekkah. Welcome to the 4th episode of Fire Emblem Pitfalls, the series where I try and clear up some misconceptions about Fire Emblem. What is up guys, this is Mekkah, and I'm here with the very special 5th episode of Fire Emblem Pitfalls, the series where I try and take away misconceptions held by Fire Emblem fans. Hey guys, my name is Mekkah. Welcome to episode 6 of Fire Emblem Pitfalls, the series where I try and take away misconceptions about the Fire Emblem series. Hey everyone, my name is Mekkah, and you're watching Fire Emblem Pitfalls, the series where I try and take away misconceptions held by Fire Emblem fans. Hell, I have actually never defined what the heck a pitfall is, so that's actually what I want to talk about this episode. Because, hilariously enough, I think there's actually a lot of misconceptions out there when it comes to pitfalls. So we're going to be talking about pitfalls in Pitfalls, but don't worry, it will actually be about Fire Emblem too. By the way, if you want to die, take a shot every time I say pitfall. Pitfall number 1. A mistake is the same as a pitfall. So if you've ever been on a Fire Emblem stream by me, or Mangs, or anyone really, you've probably seen people memeing with the word pitfall in the chat. All in good fun, nothing wrong with memeing, but I think this has contributed to the idea that doing literally anything wrong is a pitfall, and that isn't true. A literal pitfall, according to Google, is a covered pit for use as a trap. The most classic example is a big hole in the forest, used for hunting wild animals. They would usually get covered with leaves, so the animals couldn't see they were walking right into the trap. The same goes for a Fire Emblem pitfall. There has to be enough cover for the trap. It has to look appealing to the player. There has to be a good enough reason for them to step on the leaves. If we look at some of the most classic pitfalls, this rings true for pretty much all of them. Hoarding weapons seems attractive because the reward is having access to those weapons later, when presumably you will need them more. Not using Jagans is attractive because you will get more experience and more level ups, which means your units will be better later on. Accidentally putting your unit in range of an enemy, on the other hand, is not really a pitfall. There is nothing attractive about an oversight or a misclick, it's just a mistake. There is no misconception here. Speaking of attractive things, pitfall number 2. Using a unit you like is a pitfall. People love using characters for various reasons, even if, or especially if these characters are not very good. That goes for everyone. Some people like training Nino because they like seeing many stats go up. Some people like using certain characters for their personality, or because the animations are so cool, or simply because they haven't tried that unit out before. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that, and I've done my best to emphasize that whenever possible. I've used a fair share of bad units myself, and I enjoy it. A pitfall has to involve a misconception, some kind of misinformation. What matters is not what unit you're using, but the reason behind it. The best example is the whole Shanna versus Thea debate. If you're using Thea because you like her personality, or because you just feel like it, you're making a choice based on preference. Perfectly cool. If, however, you want to use the better of the two, and you decide that it's Tate because she gets hard mode bonuses, or because her strength growth is slightly better, that's where you're sliding into a pitfall, because you're putting too much emphasis on too small details that don't really matter as much as Shanna's long list of advantages does. Or let's use Amelia as an example. If you want to go with General because you enjoy the idea of a tiny girl transforming into a big tank that uses axes on chains, hey, more power to you. Have a good time. But if you want to go General because you think you need to diversify your classes and you already have other paladins, or just because it's overall better, well, then you're making a choice based on misinformation. And for clarification, that doesn't necessarily mean you're bad at Fire Emblem. But that brings me to my next point. Pitfall number 3. If you stumble into a pitfall, you suck. Pitfalls are pitfalls because they're easy to fall into. It's easy to laugh at newer players for making these common mistakes, but if you're honest, I think you know that we've all been there. Pitfalls are usually a combination of conventional internet wisdom and just plain silly bad RPG habits. and because you usually end up beating the game regardless of your mistakes, it's not like you get any negative feedback from making them, so you're likely to repeat them next time. Not just to yourself, but to other people out there too. The game is not telling you to not use Marcus, that's something people on the internet just told each other. It happened to me too. I think one of the reasons Pitfalls is such a popular thing is because almost everyone can recognize misconceptions that they have or used to have. At no point has Fire Emblem Pitfalls been about making fun of people for falling into pitfalls. Pitfall Pitfall number 4. Fire Emblem Pitfalls is aimed towards absolute beginners at Fire Emblem. Believe it or not, Fire Emblem Pitfalls was never directly intended towards people tackling a Fire Emblem game for the first time. Those people will likely be going in blind, not really knowing what to expect. They won't really have any negative feelings towards using pre-promotes or promoting before level 20 because they likely have no idea what could possibly be wrong with those. However, at some point or another they are likely to go on Reddit or some other place and ask when they should be promoting. And that's when my audience comes in. That's when you get people with preconceived notions of what you should and shouldn't do. They are people who have beaten the game and have a positive or negative association with, say, promoting early or using your Jagen. Now, if this were like 2006, these new people will probably be told to never use pre-promotes and to wait until level 20, but thankfully a lot of the people handing out advice have been watching Fire Emblem Pitfalls and they know better now. And these are the people that Fire Emblem Pitfalls is actually aimed towards. Players who have beaten the game and are now giving advice to other players. Players who might, maybe by accident, spread misinformation that makes things harder on newer players. Of course, that doesn't mean that Pitfalls cannot be helpful to new players, I mean to the contrary, but they were never the primary goal. Pitfall Pitfall number 5. Fire Emblem Pitfalls is basically the 7 commandments of Fire Emblem. I'm really flattered that some people put that much stock into Fire Emblem Pitfalls, but honestly they are not a guide to live by, not at all. The tips given in Fire Emblem Pitfalls are there to make your life easier, to get rid of compulsions that you might have, perhaps unconsciously. They do not exist to restrict you to a certain playstyle. In fact, it's the opposite. It's to give you the freedom to do whatever the hell you want. You're free to use pre-promotes, and it won't bite you in the butt later. You're free to promote whenever you want. You're free to not train your lords if you don't want to. You're free to ignore growth rates when deciding what characters to use. But you're also free to do the exact opposite. You're free to use characters that are less than optimal because you like those characters, or because you want the challenge, or because you enjoy the idea of training a weak character into a strong one. You're free to turn Emilia into a general if that's what you enjoy. All I'm trying to do with Pitfalls, and my videos in general, is show that you have a choice, that you don't have to give in to those compulsions you might have, as well as some tips on how to make things easier on yourself. And last but not least, Pitfall Pitfall number 6. Mekkah never falls into pitfalls. Just because I am supposedly the master of pitfalls doesn't mean I am completely immune to them. I understand them, I know they're there, but I still occasionally put my foot down on one of those traps. Often intentionally, or somewhat intentionally, mostly when playing a game I'm new to. For example, a while ago I rediscovered Mardek RPG, a really old series of Flash games that I found on Newgrounds. From what I know about the genre, it's a pretty standard RPG, you know, just a bunch of teenagers using medieval weapons and magic, beating up roving monsters with the occasional boss fight. And of course you get items on your journey, which you can use, or you can hoard them forever. There were several points during my playthroughs of these games that I found myself holding back a bit on using items because I knew I could get away with it. I knew I could finish the fights without using those items, but yet it was so clear that I was meant to be using them just from the way that the enemies and the items were positioned. And I felt so dumb for doing so, but clearly there wouldn't be a better time for using them, and yet I was holding back, so I guess that was because I wanted to keep my options open for later, and I think that's a natural compulsion that Fire Emblem players also get. As a side note, before I continue about Fire Emblem, Mardek chapters 1 to 3 are really fun Flash games that you should try out if you're looking for a fun RPG. It's both a good parody of RPGs in general, as well as just a good game in its own right. I'm really sad that the series is discontinued now, because they were so funny and so well written and so charming, with very relatable characters. Anyway, Fire Emblem. Me falling into pitfalls happens even within Fire Emblem. Like when I'm Iron Manning FE5 on stream for example, I find myself holding back on using rare things like, I don't know, the unlock staff, or holding off on promotions just a little bit longer, even though I know for a fact that I will benefit more from using them now than later. It's ridiculous, but it's even more likely to happen to me when I'm playing the rare Fire Emblem game that I'm not familiar with, like some kind of fan hack, and I know for sure that I'll feel like a proper idiot again when I'm playing 3 houses for the first time. I think this is mostly due to a compulsive need for humans to just keep your options open. I think hoarding and promoting early are clearly the best examples of this. You know it's going to benefit you now, but you also know there's no going back on these things. Once you've used a consumable item or you've promoted a character, there is no going back. So even though you can clearly see that the promotion bonus, for example, is a benefit now, you also know there might be a plausible possibility that you will regret it later. This is especially likely to happen to you if you're playing a game for the first time, because you have no idea what you're up against in future chapters. It's the reason I don't really use tonics much when I'm playing Conquest. I have no idea who is 2 stat points away from some kind of important benchmark, so I just try to get away without using a tonic first and only use them when I find a use for them. I know they're in high supply, but not infinite, so I try to make them count. I'm explaining all this just to illustrate that I'm not above anyone else in this regard. I make these kinds of beginner's mistakes too, however I did learn from them, and for every instance where I give into these compulsions, there's about 10 where I managed to ignore them. So, in summary, there's only one real pitfall, and that's to make your choices based on misconceptions or misinformation, and even if you are, that's not a big deal, as long as you don't spread the misconceptions all over the internet. As long as you're having fun and maybe learning a little bit, enjoy your single player game, and don't give yourself or anyone else a hard time over it. And on that note, we'll end the episode. I hope it was worth the wait. I want to thank everyone who has stuck with me so far. If you like what you saw, maybe recruit the like button by turning it blue, and maybe click some of these other things to subscribe and watch some more of my content. See ya.